Well, welcome back to another session of Getting Started with C++. I thought in this session we would go through your first C++ program, get a sense of the major parts of the program, and also take a look at an IDE that we can use to write code. However, before jumping into the IDE or code, I want to talk briefly about jargon and terminology. So coding, software development, computer science is filled with lots of new words, new phrases, new ideas that you may not have encountered before. And if you think about learning a new spoken language, say French or German or Chinese or any spoken language, when you initially start, you're going to know very few words, if any. And so you have to take some time to build up your mental model, build up your own personal dictionary so that you understand all the different words that you'll hear in videos like this one perhaps, or when you read in books and things of that nature. The most important thing is don't be scared by the jargon or terminology. No one that is a current software engineer entered this world speaking C++ or already knowing everything about software engineering. Everybody that you may encounter went from some place of knowing nothing to where they are today. And so you can do that too. So just know that there's going to be some jargon and terminology that you need to take some time just to get comfortable with. If you think about what your current mental model of programming might be, you might know a few words or a little bit about some of these words, like this graph I've put on the screen. So you might know some C++, or you might have heard of C++, you might have heard of Python. Maybe a friend of yours who's a computer science student or is learning to program or is a software engineer has talked about a bug. Maybe you've heard this weird word compiler, but you don't really know what it is. And so your programming mental model is just limited, and that's okay. Everyone starts there. As you work more, as you practice more, these circles that you see on the screen will shrink, and you'll add lots and lots and lots of new circles and more connections between all the different things you're learning. It just takes time. If you think about somebody who plays a musical instrument, nobody starts playing Beethoven sonatas. Nobody starts playing Mozart piano sonatas. You have to start somewhere. And where you're at right now is exactly the perfect place to start. So as we move into writing some code, we need a piece of software on our computer that will allow us to type the code in and do things with it after that. I'm going to try and stay relatively high level at this point, but it's just something to keep in mind that I may use some words that you're not familiar with, but we're going to get there. You just got to stick with me. One really popular piece of software that is great for writing C++, as well as some other things, but particularly it's designed for writing C++, is called CLion, and it's produced by a company called JetBrains. It is an industry strength, an industrial strength, C++ integrated development environment, an IDE. And you may have heard of other programs that people might write code in, so VS Code, Visual Studio Code, Sublime Text. Some of you may have seen Notepad or Notepad++ if you're on the Windows platform, or TextEdit on a Mac or whatnot. And you can write code in all of those different pieces of software, but an IDE is going to provide a lot more supportive functionality to taking your code from code world into the world that your computer understands, so machine code. Now, many of these platforms also, so Visual Studio Code, Sublime, etc., you can set up to be an integrated developer in IDE. But I think for us, a good place to start is with CLion. So in this video, I don't want to get stuck or bogged down in the installation steps. I might make a video about that in the future. I want to kind of focus on our first C++ program, but in an IDE. So if you'd like to install CLion on your system, I would really suggest going to the JetBrains help documentation, which I've provided a link here at the bottom of the screen. It's a really clear and easy to understand set of instructions. And if you scroll down a little bit on that page, you'll come to a section called Toolchain requirements. And so if you're on a Windows platform and you install CLion just directly, you'll get something called min.gw, which stands for minimal GNU for Windows. And it will allow you to compile and build C++ code, no problem. There are some other options, as you can see in these bullet points below. And then if you click on the tabs that are outlined in red, Mac OS or Linux, if you're on those platforms, it will provide directions on how to install the tool chains for Mac or Linux. So you may hear, this is a new word, toolchain. What that means is basically a collection of pieces of software that will help you convert your source code, which we're going to see in a second, into compiled code, into machine code that your computer can understand. And so there's the compiler, and there's just a whole bunch of other things that are associated with compiling that you don't need to worry about right now at all. But if you want to go ahead and install CLion, go to that web page that was at the bottom here and check out the installation guide, and it's really great and pretty easy to follow. Before we move into CLion, if you are enjoying these videos, go ahead and hit the like button and press subscribe, and that will help other people find the videos also. All right, so here we are in CLion. When you open CLion for the first time, you might be presented with a screen or window that sort of looks like this one. Yours may look different. It might not be dark themed, not a problem. All you need to do is look for the new project button. Or if you don't see the new project button, you can always go to the file menu and choose new project from there. So when I click new project, it's going to bring me to a page that looks like this. You can certainly leave language standard as C++ 14, no problem there. And over on the left-hand side, you may have fewer options or other options. Most important is to leave C++ executable selected. And then in location, you just need to provide a folder to store the project. So in this example, I'm going to create a new folder by just typing in hello world. And if you want to use a file navigator, you can click on the little folder over here on the right, and it'll allow you to use a file navigator to create that folder. So once you have that all typed in, then you can go ahead and click the create button. Okay, so after you click that create button in the CLion welcome screen, you are taken to the main window for CLion. And it can be kind of overwhelming if you're really new to programming. That's okay, one step at a time. And yours may even look slightly different than mine. You may have different tabs along the bottom, for instance. Your project explorer might be a little bit different. Even the color coding might be a little bit different, but you should be presented with basically this kind of layout. Now, as I said, it can be kind of overwhelming. So let me just point out some of the important parts. First of all, on the left-hand side, you have the Project Explorer. And from the Project Explorer, a lot of this we're going to ignore. External libraries, scratches and consoles, don't worry about that. We'll eventually get to making some modifications to the cmakelist.txt file, but for now, just pretend it's not even there. And the file that we're going to start working with is main.cpp. Now you'll notice over on the right-hand side, main.cpp is the file that's open. So this is a tabbed panel. As we get more sophisticated and have more source code files, you'll have more tabs up here along the top. But for now, we're just looking at main.cpp. Now you may also have the cmake list.txt tab open. You can go ahead and close that by clicking the little X. These tabs along the bottom, for now, we're going to ignore until we're ready to build our first program or compile our first program. But for now, you can not worry about them. And then up here in the top right portion of the screen is some of the important buttons that we're going to use for building our project or compiling it, and then for executing our project. So now let's talk a little bit about main.cpp. So main.cpp is a file that's created by CLion kind of automatically when you create a new project. And as you can see, it puts this interesting hello world string in the file for you. A little bit more on that later. So the most important part of main.cpp is the .cpp extension. So as we're getting started with coding, all of our code is going to go in files that end in .cpp. They don't have to be main.cpp. We'll have other files. Maybe we'll have phone.cpp or game.cpp, but for now it's just main.cpp. You could change this file by right-clicking and choosing refactor and rename if you don't like main.cpp for some reason, but it's a good place to start. So for now, all of our code is going to start in .cpp files. All right, so now that we're looking, so we sort of have a layout of CLion, let's look at the code itself. Now, if you've never coded before, this can look really weird, frankly. Totally get that. If you've done some coding before in, say, Java or Python, some of this may look similar to what you're familiar with, and other parts of it may be completely foreign. So let's go through each line in this file and kind of get a sense of what it means and what it's doing for us in terms of our first C++ program. So the first line is this #include IOStream. And so what this line is doing is it's looking for a library called IOStream. Now a library is just a provided set of code that's already been written for you. In this case, it's provided by the people that create the compiler. IOStream stands for input output stream, and it's how we are going to access things like the console for being able to write things out, so send things to the user, and also read things in, say, from the keyboard. Okay, so important point here for now is this is just some code that's already written for you that is going to make writing your future projects easier. All right, so then we get to this int main open parenthesis, close parenthesis, open curly brace. That's a lot of enclosing characters. So whenever you're writing a C++ program, the compiler, as it's converting your source code into executable code, needs to know where your program is starting. Think about it in terms of cooking a big fancy meal. You may have a high level outline of, well, first I'm going to cook the sauce, and then I'm going to cook the noodles, and so on and so forth. But each of those processes for cooking the sauce or cooking the noodles has its own set of steps that go with it. Okay, and so the compiler needs to know what is the high level quote unquote recipe for getting things done in the right order. And the recipe or the function that it looks for is called main. So main is a special function that is where the compiler is going to look for things that it's going to do first. Okay. Int, don't worry about that now. There's going to be a lot of aspects of sort of getting started where you're going to have to accept on faith. But I promise in the not too distant future, you're going to understand what everything on the screen means in great detail. So main with the open close parenthesis is defining this starting point for the program. And then all of the steps of the recipe for main, or of the process for main, for the main method, are going to be enclosed in the curly braces. You'll notice a theme as you learn more about C++ is that usually an open parenthesis has a closed parenthesis, and that an open brace has a closed brace. So that's just something to keep in mind. Now, when we get to line 4, it gets a little more crazy. You got lots of colons and less than signs and open double quotes and whatnot. Okay, we're going to start, for this line, we're going to start in the center. So this sequence of characters that to us we know as hello world, enclosed in double quotes, is a string in C++. And the goal of this program is to print the string hello world to the user. So I'm going to go ahead and add a comment above the include statement. Goal print hello world to the user. Okay. Now, what's a comment? A comment is just words, strings, pointers, tips that the programmer is leaving either to him or herself, or that would be useful for other programmers in the future that might be adding or looking at or modifying this code. It starts with 2 forward slashes. There's another type of comment we'll look at later, but for now, we'll just know that it starts with 2 forward slashes. And so I'm just putting that our goal right now is to print hello world to the user. So if I come back to what is now line 6, it was line 4 before, I have hello world in double quotes. So if I want to print something directly to the user, that's always going to be the same thing. I put it in double quotes. So that's hello world. And then I need to tell the computer where to print these characters, the H, the E, the L, the L, the O, world, etc. So those characters are going to get printed to the console, the terminal. If you're familiar with Windows command prompt, it kind of looks like the command prompt. We'll see it here in a second. And so the place that I'm going to print these characters is called console out, cout. So then what is the std : before it? So everything in IOStream is in this thing called the standard namespace, which is just a collection of code. So you should think about it as like a big plastic storage bin where all of the provided code is stored, and the label on the outside of the plastic storage bin is std : So here's our std : cout. So again, cout stands for console out. So this part up to here is saying I want to print hello world to the console. And these 2 less than signs are a special character sequence that say, okay, take the H, the E, the L, and so on and so forth, and print it to cout, or put it to cout. Then we have to deal with, well, what is this business here at the end? Well, we already know what standard : is. That's our plastic storage bin of all the code that's provided by the compiler developers. And ENDL stands for end line. So what that's doing is it's saying to the computer, after you print hello world, go ahead and put a new line character, so as if it was going to then start printing to the next line if I had more cout statements. Okay. So altogether, this line is going to print hello world and then a new line character to console out, to the console. Now you'll see that there's 2 lines here that end in semicolons. Semicolons are going to become your new favorite key on your keyboard. Every statement And you think of a statement as like a step in a recipe, or one step of some process that you're doing. In C++, all of these steps have to be terminated, or they must end with a semicolon. So, sorry about that. This is one statement. This return 0 is another statement, and since they're each statements, they're terminated in semicolons. Okay, so we've kind of gone through what standard, cout, hello world, standard inline means. This return 0 is just something that for now you're going to put at the bottom of every main function that you write. It's actually related to this int right here. I don't want to get bogged down in these details. For now, just accept that you're going to put it at the bottom of your main method, and it's going to let the program terminate properly. All right, so we have a simple program. I know we didn't write any of this code. We'll add a bit in a second, but this is enough code to get something going. All right, so the first thing we're going to do is click the hammer right up here. Okay, this is going to build the project, and you'll notice a new panel pops up that prints a whole bunch of weird things that right now are not going to make any sense, and that's okay. The most important thing is if there was an error, it would tell you in this this panel that there was something about your code that wasn't able to be compiled. Okay, but it says build finished. There were no errors, so looks like things are good. So we're going to hop over this drop down and we're going to hit the play button. And you'll notice what happens is it prints hello world. Okay, which happens to be what we have right here. And then there's kind of a weird empty space, and then process finishes with exit code 0. So this empty space here is because of this new line. Okay, so let's add another cout statement, and that's what we're going to call them. We're going to call them cout statements. So standard cout, how is the weather? All right, and as I'm typing these things, you see these like weird long drop downs. That's part of what's called code completion, and we'll get into that, I promise. It's very helpful, but our programs are not sophisticated enough to really need code completion yet. And also, it's good to kind of do things by hand for a while. Okay, so I've added a line of code to our source file, our main.cpp, and I want to now build it and execute it. So I could click the hammer and then click the play button, but in CLion for now, if I just click the play button, it's going to rebuild first because I made some changes to the source code file. Okay, so you'll notice now it says hello world and how's the weather. So let's just say I took off this end line at the end of the first statement and rebuilt it. Just take 1 second, maybe pause the video, and make a guess about what you think the output is going to be. All right, so now we're going to run the program, and you'll notice that hello world and how's the weather are right next to one another. So all you need to think about is, well, that end line that was there before is what pushed how is the weather down to the next line. So this is just an example that the end line is doing something, since sometimes it may seem mysterious. Okay, so let's just recap. Pound include IOStream is going to that large storage plastic bin of code provided by the compiler Toolchain developers, and for us, IOStream is what has the input, output. Right now we're just using output code for us. Int main open paren close paren open brace is the start of this special function that the compiler is going to look for, that's going to start any program. Okay, for us it's our hello world program. Next line is standard cout less than hello world. So this is going to print hello world to the screen. It's a C++ statement, so it's ending in a semicolon. Then we're printing how's the weather in the next line, and then we're going to print a new line character. So we're terminating that with a semicolon, and this return 0 is letting the computer know that everything worked according to plan. And the last thing I'll point out is you may be questioning, okay, well, hello world, I'm sorry, so this line, standard cout hello world and standard cout how's the weather, standard inline are ending in semicolons, but I didn't put a semicolon at the end of this line. So the reason for that is the int main line that I'm highlighting right now is not considered a statement. It's considered a header or kind of identifier for a collection of statements. So only these 3 lines here are considered statements and are ending in semicolons. So congratulations, you've made it through your first C++ program. You have a sense of what some of these things do, how to build your program in CLion, how to run your program, and how to print some things to the terminal. So with that, I'm going to leave you here, and I'm going to say go forth and write some code.